And Mark, before we get into our next topic, just got to say, if you're listening on podcast services around the world, even if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to go and rate and review the podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. It would really mean the world to us. I hope we're giving you that 5-star treatment that we shoot for each and every week. So please go ahead and do that. But what we're going to look at next is we're moving from the Packers to another team that made a head coaching move. And I'll be completely honest. I was going to talk, I had this lined up as a topic, should they do it? And by the time we recorded tonight, which is Tuesday, they already went ahead and did it. Kliff Kingsbury is the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Here's a little bit of his timeline. So he's been with the Texas Tech Red Raiders since 2013, went 35-40 as their head coach, got fired after this year where he went 5-7, 3-6 in the Big 12. Then he signed a contract and was contractually obligated to be the offensive coordinator of USC. Originally, the Trojans were blocking him from interviewing for head coaching jobs, but then let him interview for this one. He interviewed early Tuesday for the Cardinals, got the job immediately. And there were, I know, like Colin Cowherd said, that he had 2 sources tell him before the interview that it was basically going to be a done deal, that he was going to be signed at some point very soon by the Cardinals. The basic question I just want to ask you and just be frank with it is, did the Cardinals make a mistake by hiring Kliff Kingsbury? Is that what they're doing here?
So there's 2 things I got to say by it. And my real answer is yes, because I think he's out of here in 2 years.
1 year. Look at Steve Wilkes.
Yeah, I think they'll give him more than Steve Wilkes. Steve Wilkes to me was we don't really know what to do.
Fuck, we hired the wrong
guy. No, I think they just picked whoever was available.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say, yeah, it's a mistake. The only reason I'm saying a little bit of a no is because, let's be real, Arizona is one of the least desirable places to go out of all the options that are there.
Except for location.
I wouldn't want to be in that Arizona heat.
I mean, it's in Scottsdale. It's like Jay Glazer, I heard him say today, he's like, I would take the. He's like, I love it in Scottsdale. He's like, beautiful weather. You don't have to worry about anything.
No. And it doesn't matter. Location doesn't matter. There are better locations for sure. But just talent-wise, the fact that they just fired a coach after 1 year, they haven't had that much success. It's an aging roster. It is not a desirable place to go. So for the reason I'm saying that it's not the biggest mistake in the world is because if you're ever going to take the gamble, now's the time to do it. If you're ever going to do this,
you've hit rock bottom.
Essentially, I mean, it's not necessarily that you're at rock bottom because there are some pieces there. You're not completely devoid of talent, but there's not a ton of talent on this team. So if you're going to gamble, now's the time to do it. The unfortunate thing is I see a lot of people using that to justify and convince themselves that this was a good move. Even saying that this is the best time to gamble with a incredibly risky hire still doesn't make it a good decision. People are going out there and being like, this is a great decision. Let's go gamble on it. Why not? And you still can't ignore the fact that he's got a losing record. Yes, I know other coaches have had losing records too, but he had a losing record in college football, which is a very hard thing to translate into the NFL. Just ask Pete Carroll, who tried it twice, failed twice, came back and finally got it put together.
Well, came back to avoid sanctions and finally got it right.
Yeah, pretty much. And then ask all the other college head coaches that get fired right away. You know, you look at what he does, and people are like, he's going to do awesome offensively. Just pair him with a defensive coordinator. 550 is the average amount of yards per game, 42 points per game. That doesn't happen in the NFL. It's just not going to happen. There's a lot of people out there who are like, well, the air raid, I mean, enough teams are close enough to an air raid offense anyways. And no, that's not the case, really. You have these amazing NFL defenses. He's never seen a defense before in college in the Big 12.
It's Big 12. There's only one team I would say is the closest to an air raid in the NFL. The Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
Like, they're the closest. But and
part of the reason, too, is because they lost their star running back this year.
Like, I saw an article recently today. Well, obviously it was today. That is basically like, oh, Patrick Mahomes is a reason why Kliff Kingsbury is a good hire. How? Like, what? Because Patrick Mahomes had such a great season, we're saying that Kliff Kingsbury is the reason why?
What college was Mahomes at?
He was at Texas Tech.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
With Kingsbury.
Yeah, so I think the reason they're saying is that he developed Mahomes. Mahomes wouldn't be Mahomes if it wasn't for
But the thing that I look at is
Kingsbury.
Mahomes' first year as starter, they went 7-6 overall. The next year, 5-7. So it's like your record got worse in college. With Mahomes.
I think that argument is not the record. That argument is just simply
he developed Mahomes and made Mahomes what he is, and why the Chiefs fell in love with him.
And then a lot of people put because he overlaps with Baker Mayfield too. Although it's funny when people say that, because weren't we just like giving a lot of credit to Baker Mayfield and how nobody at Texas Tech wanted him, so he had to leave and go to Oklahoma. But I just think that people are grasping at straws to say this is a good move, when this move comes down to a few things. The Arizona Cardinals knew that people weren't going to be that excited to go there, so they made the splash. They are kind of getting taken advantage of by this hire. This is a guy who got fired for being a losing coach, the first losing coach in Texas Tech in like the last 4 or 5 coaches, then goes to USC as an offensive coordinator, gets his shot to kind of upgrade into the NFL, and just runs and goes for it. And I don't blame him for that. I do not blame him for taking the job. But I also think that it feels very much like this is the very attractive guy who doesn't really want to date the ugly person here, but they've got good money. So I'm going to go for it.
There's one reason why this was two reasons why it was made. The first one, like you automatically said, it is the least sexiest of the job, or one of the least sexiest. Like, I would
just say least sexy.
Sexiest is what I meant. So I would say probably the only other job that would be available that I would put below, there's 2 jobs that I would put below Arizona. The first one is Denver because of John Elway. I would not want to go there.
It's a fair argument.
Because you got to have the right guy. That's why, like, for Denver, how right now the last thing I heard, it's between Fangio and Munchak.
Yeah.
I think that is a perfect job for Vic Fangio, because he can stand up to John Elway and not be intimidated by the aura of John Elway, the shadow of John Elway that you have.
The fact that those are the 2 people they're deciding against, I think, is another reason of why John Elway shouldn't be a GM.
Yeah, and then Tampa Bay, because they were dysfunctional this year. Jameis Winston should not be their quarterback long term. Like, this should be his last year as their quarterback. That is not a situation I would want to go into. And I agree that
Tampa Bay is probably the worst of the options, but it was good enough for Bruce Arians. So,
did you hear
so apparently it wasn't that bad.
And of course, we're going to talk about Bruce Arians after our mock draft. So in 2 weeks, when we hit the other ones that hopefully jobs come in. Did you hear the funny thing about Bruce Arians' interview? So
nope.
They did the interview, then they took him to the hospital to do a physical and interviewed his doctor before they gave him the job.
I don't have a problem with that.
And like Jay Glazer on The Herd today was like, he's like, I've never heard that before, where a coach had to go right after the interview with the like GM and such to go take a physical so they could talk to the doctor of
it's a big investment.
Candidate.
I'm all right with it.
So it was just unusual. You never see it. The one thing this makes sense though is because Josh Rosen needs a coach that he can work with.
And Josh Rosen's going to get a big benefit. It doesn't matter what we feel about his success. Josh Rosen will be a successful young quarterback with Kliff Kingsbury.
And the reason why I say it, the Baker Mayfield one, I kind of go, because Baker only played 1 year at Texas Tech before transferring to Oklahoma, and really we know him for what he did with Lincoln Riley. But here are some of the quarterbacks that either as a quarterback coach, an assistant, an OC, these are the quarterbacks he got to work with through his college career. Case Keenum, who's in the NFL still, and had a good year with the Vikings.
Might not be for very long.
But Case Keenum is not hot garbage, I would say. He's a competent starter. He is okay. He's not great. He is okay. He had a really good year with the Vikings that catapulted him. Johnny Manziel, which the only reason in my mind he's out of the league is because of all the demons that were around him with his addiction problem. If he didn't have his addiction problem, he might have been able to do something in the NFL. But in college,
I don't think he would have.
Was really good. Davis Webb, who probably isn't panning out right now. He was with the Giants. Now he's with the Jets. Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield. Those were the quarterbacks that he had worked with. And I think the main reason they made this job his is that he can work with Josh Rosen, and Josh Rosen needs somebody to work with. Because like I mentioned on the Primetime Podcast today to Brandon, when Brandon was bashing Josh Rosen, said that Josh Rosen looked like hot garbage this year, that the Cardinals should think about getting a replacement for Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen wasn't set up for success this year. You could tell Steve Wilkes and his staff, A, didn't know what to do with Josh Rosen. B, they didn't have the personnel. It wasn't all Steve Wilkes' fault because I've played with the Cardinals in Madden, and it's impossible to do anything with that offensive line.
Of course, Madden's the deciding factor.
It's not all his fault. They don't have an offensive line there.
No, I mean, he was set up to fail. We said that on the podcast when he got hired, that it wasn't going to work.
And I believe, I'd have to go back and listen. I believe when he got hired, I foresaw that said he's going to get shutted. I think I did. It might have been later in the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if I said it when he got hired. But Kliff was made the coach because they needed to bring in somebody who could work with Josh Rosen. Because the thing that I told Brandon on the Primetime Podcast is, what was the one thing we kept saying about Josh Rosen last year when we were
he was
talking
the most
about the
NFL
draft?
ready?
The most NFL ready. And he's looked possibly Lamar's looked better than him. Baker's looked better than him. For the most part, I would say Darnold looked better than him. And even Josh Allen.
I don't know if I would go that far.
Well,
Josh Allen, I'll give you.
Sam Darnold later in the year had injuries, but earlier on, I would say because of his play earlier on, had a better overall season than Josh Rosen this year.
Yeah, and
Josh Rosen had the worst season out of all the rookies.
I was actually surprised that Josh Rosen even got to start because even though I knew, you knew Sam Bradford would get hurt someday.
But they had the ginger draft too.
But they did. They had people in front of him, so it was surprising, but. It's totally the Josh Rosen thing, but the other thing, same thing we said about the Packers and Matt LaFleur. It's you don't want to hire Kliff Kingsbury and say, you be our offensive coordinator. Because if it works, he's gone.
Yeah.
And it's
somebody else.
Pretty obvious by the way he just treated USC to say, thanks for saving my ass, but peace.
What do you think about that?
I don't blame him.
Him getting hired. He's under contract, and then 2 weeks later leaves for an NFL job? I don't blame
him because who wouldn't leave for an NFL head coaching job is what it comes down to. If it was like an NFL offensive coordinator, I still probably wouldn't blame him, but I would be like, all right, maybe you shouldn't have done that. But I almost sneezed on the podcast. But the thing that I think about with that is he does show that he cares a little bit about himself, which I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily that entirely surprised by it, but he cares a lot about himself, and that's one of the reasons why I don't think you could have made him an offensive coordinator, because he would have gone and become a head coach somewhere if he had the opportunity. The first chance he got, he would have went for it. So I think that's an interesting thing. But to me, just like Matt LaFleur and the Packers, this was we don't want him to leave. We're going to gamble that this is our guy, and we're going to just make him the head coach. Because if we do have success and he's an offensive coordinator, he's gone. So we have to just do it. And that's really what's happening with the NFL. Quarterbacks are so important, especially young quarterbacks and their development, that Josh Rosen can't go through a third offensive coordinator next year. not this season coming up, but the following season, 2020, he can't be going through his third offensive coordinator by then. Actually, I think that'd be his fourth because he's already on his third offensive coordinator. He can't do that. You can't do that because you're going to ruin a high draft pick. That's another reason why they go for this. They have to make a splash. They have to just give him the keys to the castle already and hope that it works out okay.
I look at it, and I mean, this was the job when you and I looked at the Black Monday coaches. We said that this was the job that was perfect for Adam Gase. And I look at it and I go, like, the Cardinals interviewed Adam Gase. Like, there's a report from New Year's Day that the Cardinals, that Adam Schefter said that Gase would interview with the Cardinals that Wednesday. My question is, what made you think in your head, you being the GM of the Cardinals, what made you think that Kliff Kingsbury would be a better option for Josh Rosen and for your NFL team than Adam Gase, who has at least been in the NFL?
To me, it's obvious. It's 550 yards per game, 42 points per game. They saw those two numbers and said, yes, we want that. They saw that and thought
even
success.
Though the college game is different.
Yes, 100%. Okay. They looked at Mahomes and saw what he was able to do in a much better team with a much better coaching staff and said, we want that. They look at this and say, well, what does Kliff Kingsbury suck at? Defense? We'll get him a defensive coordinator. What does he suck at? Recruiting, especially defense. He doesn't. I would say he sucks at recruiting. He sucks at recruiting defense. Well, doesn't have to recruit anymore. We got a GM who pays people. People come here because they want money.
Well, pays people or drafts them.
Yeah.
Either or.
And the head coach doesn't need to be a part of the draft in any way, shape, or form. They've got scouts and they got a GM. That's what they do. So they took the things, I will say that, they're taking away the thing, not necessarily they, but the things he is worst at are things he's going to have nothing to do with. So they're getting most of the good stuff out of him. It's just still a big gamble.
I wonder who they're going to bring in to be the DC because, like, a guy like Todd Bowles.
I think that's Buccaneers.
Yeah, he's going to be with Bruce Arians. So, I mean, or the rumor is that he'll be with Bruce Arians. So, like, me, I'm thinking about the defensive guys that were on the market. Like, I don't think there's the guys that were on the market that were going to make lateral moves, like a Vic Fangio. He doesn't come along because Vic Fangio will be like, "Why make the lateral move to go with the Cardinals? I'll just stay in Chicago
bad
if I don't
defense.
get
I have
one."
a great defense.
Exactly. Where there's no, in my mind, Bowles was it, unless there's one that I'm not thinking of where it was like defensive guy who got fired.
This is the phone call that I'm going to try desperately to make, and I'll beg and plead, and I'll take my shoes off if I have to. I'm going to call Rex Ryan and say, you want to come be a defensive coordinator? Are you a little bored in the booth?
I don't know. He
looks like he's having a great time.
He had fun ripping into Cody Parkey.
Yeah. Well, he's a big Bears fan all of a sudden. Who would have guessed that the son of Buddy Ryan's a Bears fan?
I know, right?
But he loves the Bears. And you know what? For as much as I made fun of Rex Ryan for a long time, it makes me kind of like Rex Ryan a little bit nowadays.
Did you see the segment on Get Up?
A little bit of it.
Where they asked him if he feels sorry, and he was basically like, no, his one the way he was talking was like an NFL coach who hates kickers. Because he's like, they don't do anything. They're just there to kick a ball. They don't do anything all year. Kick the ball. Make the field goal. That's your job. And I was like, whoa, Rex.
Rex Ryan had a job, too.
A little bit of sympathy
Win
for the
some
guy.
games. He got fired, too. So I think it's a little bit of bitterness on the part of Rex Ryan. But anyways, and that's coming from somebody who, the next day fired up Madden and cut Cody Parkey. I ended up with Steven Gostkowski. I think I'm doing pretty all right. But anyways, it's just, to me, the Kingsbury hire is them saying, we sure hope this is the next hot, McVay, the next Peterson, the next Nagy. We really want to get one of those. Let's just hope that this is it.
With me personally, I don't think it's going to work out. With me, there's I'm looking at it 75% it doesn't work out, 25 it does. We're like in 2-3 years, we're looking at it where I think if it doesn't work out, it's not going to be the Cardinals fire him. I think it'll be hey, I'm going to go back to college. Like I'm
Maybe
not
he runs
liking it
before
here.
he sees it.
I'm just gonna resign and go back to college. There's
do
a college
wonder-
calling my name.
The one thing I'll give him credit for in this case is Texas Tech did have a very bad defense. So just having a better defense in the NFL, and we hope it's going to keep getting better for Cardinals fans, just having that and not constantly being forced to be in a shootout, does that allow him to use his run game more and become a little bit more balanced? Because you got David Johnson, you probably want to use him. It'll make you better. And there's not going to be success in the NFL. You know, Mahomes is one thing right now, but this is 1 year, and I don't know if throwing it 50, 60 times in a game really works out for the majority of a career. Eventually, you got to calm it down a little bit.
Or if you're throwing it 50 times, how many of those throws are going to be dump-off pass? Where it's like, hey, technically it's an attempt, but it was like a Patrick Mahomes. Wait, what was that? A pass or a shovel?
Well, the ball
what?
is literally only not in somebody's hands for about 2 inches.
Exactly.
And then Tyreek Hill has it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's tons of that.
And they got Christian Kirk, who I know he's coming off of I think it's a leg injury. I think he broke his leg late in the year. But, like, he's a guy that I could see working out well with stuff like that on, like, wide receiver screens.
This is definitely a better place to be for Kingsbury, but I don't know. I'm not sold on it in any way, shape, or form. It's a much bigger gamble than the Matt LaFleur gamble.
The best tweet I saw was a joke of like, yeah, Kingsbury's going to go to the NFL. He'll be with the Cardinals. And then when Clay Helton gets fired from USC, he'll be back as the head coach.
There you go.
That's the whole reason he didn't want to go, was he wanted to be the head coach, not the OC.
And that is one extra thing, though. The fact, and this came back to a thing you were asking before about USC and how I felt about that. The fact that USC was blocking him from even interviewing, I don't blame USC for that, but I don't blame him for being mad about it either.
That tells me that they knew he was going to get hired by somebody.
They knew he was going to get hired, and they didn't trust him either. They didn't trust him to even interview. But we'll see what happens.
And I mean, the one thing I will say is like Colin Cowherd came out and tweeted that he hated that he did that. But I was like, oh, Colin, you're all one for, like, when Kevin Durant moved, you're all for mobility. But in this, you're magically not for
Cowherd's
mobility.
all for whatever's going to get him clicks at the moment.
I just saw it and I was like, really? Like, come on, man. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. What do you think of the hire? What do you think of the hire? Is it good? Is it bad? Look into your crystal ball. Tell us, is it going to work out for the Cardinals? Is it going to work out for Kliff Kingsbury? Let us know in that comment section down below.